This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi called Columbus. Sometimes I write about the rest of the state. This is episode 4 in my Columbus Housing Authority expose that started about a truck that I heard rumors about that the Housing Authority got scammed. And we already know that they're almost $90,000 into a $60,000 truck that they purchased. But I talked about the emails and the email trail that I have been picking through from my FOIA requests, but tonight I want to take the email trail and pair it up to the board minutes that parallel that time frame, but also about some of the anomalies I found in the board minutes while looking for the truck and the scammer, and any discussion about said truck and said scammer. But here are some of the anomalies that caught my eye. So one of the earliest board minutes I have is, or the first one I have is from October 18th, 2023. It says, police tracking devices for all 12 vehicles discussed. Mrs. Taylor submitted a proposal to secure the devices for a monthly service fee total of $468. With whom was this agreement? And were any other bids proposals explored? And why do they need police tracking on their vehicles? And on which vehicles? And how many vehicles will be tracked at that fee per month? Perhaps they should have used one of those on the check that they sent the scammer, but I digress. Per the December 20th, 2023 CHA minutes, quote, the chairperson states that the CHA should be paying to the city the fees in lieu of taxes in the approximate sum of $50,384. Okay, this is a single sentence, but who at the city got the money and for what, quote, taxes? They're a government entity, so who gets that $50K? Where is that check and who was it made out to? And how was it coded? This is also nebulous and unclear, but let's get back to our truck and the truck-related items. The truck purchase emails in my hand all began on April 2024. So I backtracked to find any mention of the trucks and possibly Rusty Walker and Future Spec, who were mentioned in the very first email, or who actually sent the very first email related to the truck, which led to this little gem in the January 2024 meeting notes. Mr. Lewis then called upon the executive director to give an update on maintenance. The executive director then called upon the maintenance director, Larry Jones, to update the board on the status of maintenance. Mr. Jones said he has had drawings for upgrades since August 2023 and said Rusty needs the okay from the Columbus Housing Authority to put the work out for a bid. The chairperson then called the executive director to cover upcoming training. Commissioner Gray made a motion to table renovation to 16 units until next meeting and invite Rusty Walker to attend. Now, why would Rusty Walker, who was down in Gulfport, who guided the purchase of the truck and even went out and looked for comps that he copy and pasted off the internet, be involved in bids for housing unit renovations? Why would he, as a contractor with the CHA, be putting CHA projects out for bid? What exactly is his role? What is the scope of his contract with CHA? Then, in February, Walker is referenced again. Commissioner Gray made a motion to approve Rusty Walker to proceed to secure bids on the 20 units. Upon second by Commissioner Andrews and unanimous vote by the board, the motion carried. Larry Jones need to do some more roof replacement. Commissioner Lewis made a motion to have Larry Jones and Deborah Taylor get Rusty Walker to develop a plan to do roofs in phases. Upon second by Commissioner Andrews and unanimous vote by the board, the motion carried. Now, I have the same questions. Why is Future Specs finding bids for CHA and not the ED or the assistant ED? Then in the same document, Walker's company Future Spec is mentioned. The chairperson then stated he would like to see evaluations for executive director, that something needs to be done to increase morale, and that the executive director needs to work better with Future Spec to ensure progress is being made on procurement and needed work. Why does Walker and Future Spec have such influence with the organization? Why is the ED required to work better with Future Spec and not the other way around? Doesn't a contractor work at the leisure of the executive director? On March 20th, 2024, still no mention of the truck or the truck title or the scam, but this. Larry Jones then told the board that Rusty Walker suggested that the CHA advertise for re-roofing the Shield Sims and Jesse Carter sites. Commissioner Andrews moved to approve advertising for bids. Upon second by Commissioner Gray and unanimous vote by the board, the motion carried. Further, the board discussed the bids and accepted. Mr. Jones then presented the bid tabulations for the 24 units at the Shield Sims site, with Connerly Construction being the lowest and best responsive bidder at $238,000 for carpentry. Jay's Buildings bid was $248,000. Andrews made a motion to award the bid to Connerly Construction as being the lowest and best responsive bid. Upon second by Commissioner Richardson and unanimous vote by the board, the motion carried. So were these bids proposed by Future Spec? Notice there is still no mention of the upcoming trucks purchase, nothing in April either. On May 15th, 2024, Future Spec's Rusty Walker asked to change his contracted monthly pay from $2,500 a month to $4,295 a month, almost double his previous monthly contracted fee. How long is he contracted for? What services does he provide for such a high fee? That is $51,540 a year. Then on June 17th, 2024, I found that the board made a resolution awarding ratifying the re-roofing units at William Washington and Shield Sims for $164,870. Bids Futurescape would be responsible for having obtained. Notice it was William Washington and Shield Sims. Yet in the ledger, just the 68 unit William Washington project check is $244,387.50. Considering that the bid was for $164,000, that is a significant difference. Is this later amount approved? Where? It's not shown in the minutes anywhere that the significant difference between what was awarded and a month later what the check was written for. Why is it significantly more for just one of the units when it was bid at that $164,870 to do two properties in total? Was there that much subroofing damage not seen in the bid process? What exactly happened? What part does Future Spec play in this? What did it then cost to replace the Shield Sims roof later? Looking at the ledgers, I find the following, and I'll break it down per location. William Roberts is a 100-unit facility. On October 30th, 2023, Bama Roofing of Tuscaloosa was paid $179,654 to replace the roof. 6 months later, on March 14th, 2024, J&H Roofing was paid $144,006 to replace the roof at the William Roberts facility. William Washington is a 68-unit facility. On July 23rd, 2024, Bama Roofing was paid $239,458 to replace the roofing. But less than 4 months later, on December 13th, 2024, Bama Roofing was paid $167,270 to replace the roof. Were these two new roofs per site? If so, why so frequent are the roofs being replaced and at so much higher than what the resolution permitted? If not that, then are these two separate payments splitting the cost over time for one job? If so, why is it significantly more than the resolution? Did Future Spec and Rusty Walker oversee these bids? Does he get a percentage of these bids? What role did Future Spec and Rusty Walker play in this roof replacement project? Nowhere in the meeting minutes are these cost overruns addressed by the board. Why? And still no mention of the truck. On July 17th, 2024, board minutes have absolutely no mention of the truck, no mention of the scam or the missing check or the lack of a title. Yet in the email trail, we know that Dixie Turner was instructed to send a memo to the board on July 3rd referencing the issue and what she knew so far. See, in the previous podcast episode about email number 43. Was that Columbus Housing Authority memo to the board ever even sent? We don't know. On July 15th of 2024, Director Graythree, the board attorney, and the dealership controller, Rodney McGuire, are in an email pissing match over the scam, and still none of this is mentioned in the July 17th, 2024 board minutes 2 days later. There is also zero mention of the police report that Guthrie filed about the scam with the Columbus Police Department. None. Why? On July 29th, 2024, there is finally a one sentence mention of a truck and a dispute, yet still no mention of being scammed out of almost $60,000. Quote from the minutes: the board then discussed a dispute over the purchase of a truck, but no action was taken. Who keeps the meeting minutes? The board attorney. Why is the scam yet to be mentioned? On August 30th, 2024, at that meeting, there is still no mention of the truck, the scam, the missing 60,000, or the needed truck title. Yet since the last meeting, there's been a 7-point letter referenced as email 68 that I read on a previous podcast from Executive Director Guthrie to Rodney McGuire at Homer Skelton Ford, demanding the truck title, despite only paying approximately 30,000 of the 60K truck to the real dealership. There were also multiple emails between the board attorney, Jeff Turnage, and Crystal Utley at the Mississippi AG's office regarding the scam. There was also discussion between Director Guthrie and Rodney McGuire at Homer Skelton Ford with follow-ups about splitting the difference, etc. Yet, none of this appears to be mentioned in the board meeting. Why? There is one possible note that possibly refers to the truck in the 8/30/2024 meeting. The notes begin: prospective litigation. The chairperson then called upon the general counsel to discuss the issue, and the board took no official action. Prospective litigation on what? There's no note, there's no details, there's nothing. On September 11th, a special meeting of the board was called, and in executive session, they discussed some litigation, presumably the truck, because after the meeting, they came out of closed doors. Martin Andrews moved to buy 3 more F-250 trucks and 2 Ford Explorers, even though they still have not resolved the title and monies owed or the missing money of the first truck, but the motion carried. On September 12, 2024, Board Attorney Turnage sent a settlement agreement to Skelton Ford. The board met again on 9/18/2024 in closed determination to discuss litigation. Respective party positions were discussed and no action taken. It was at this time that the board attorney's bid to continue support was determined. The next board meeting is October 16th, 2024. Again, they went into closed door session to discuss litigation. The next board meeting was on November 20th, 2024. At this meeting, it was revealed that 2 city employees who served on the board had to resign due to a rule that council found while reviewing the laws related to the housing authority. The 2 immediately resigned previous to the meeting, and the board was informed before the meeting continued. The board went into executive session and discussed litigation, and council proposed terms he felt would be agreeable with the other party. I presume this is the truck. Still no mention of the scam, the police report that was filed, or any discussion of Rusty Walker's involvement in the purchase of said truck. And the scam, of course, is nowhere in the discussion on how they plan to recoup the $60K from the scammers. On December 3rd, 2024, almost 2 weeks after the board meeting, the executive director, Guthrie, sends the Ford dealership a note that they are ready to move forward and with the release agreement. At the next board meeting, the executive director tells the board he has not heard back on the vehicle issue from the vendor. I presume this is the truck again, but God forbid that the notes have any specificity to them. The next meeting, January 28, 2025, there's absolutely no mention of the truck or that Turnage had contacted the Oklahoma Attorney General's office before January 11th, 2025, and had shared Agent Lasher's contact, or that the executive director had sent the front and back of the check that they had sent this scammer and that was cashed, and the tracking number to that agent. Not a single mention on the official record anywhere. Now that's interesting. So why? On February 19th, 2025, Turnage presented an update on the dispute with the Ford dealership. Finally, something is said, but the agreement with the Ford dealership is still not signed and there is no discussion listed. And again, nothing about the scammer or going after the $60,000 that's missing. On March 19th, 2025, the board met again and zero mention of the 2/21/2025 discussion between the executive director and the Ford dealer or the mutual release of liability phrase added to the settlement document. Now, I was not sent an April 2025 board minutes despite my request. So either the board never met in April or they left them off on purpose. Now, here's a tidbit. I called on April 24th, 2025 at 2:30 to speak with the person who could direct me where the contact information for the executive director and the attorney were and where their FOIA forms were online. And within 2 hours of me starting this process of trying to file a simple FOIA request at 4:40 on the afternoon of April 24th, that same day, per Lucy at the web company in Sparta, Wisconsin, that they have their hosting service, Management Computer Support. They called Management Computer Support to take down their website. They instructed them at that time to put up an under construction page and they would get back to them to update the page at some point. As of today, May 13th at 3 p.m., they have not sent any updates. And the ColumbusAuthority.org page is still down and under construction. Any compliance folks out there, as a government housing authority, how long can they make it inaccessible? Meaning their website. Is there a requirement to keep an electronic access for tenants? What about application availability online for prospective tenants? What about ADA compliance issues related to information available online? I presume since the settlement request was signed April 16th, 2025, surely they finally have the truck title. Or did the scammers figure out how to reroute the Columbus Housing Authority's mail as well? More FOIA requests are being written, will be made public once sent to the Columbus Housing Authority. Transparency matters. I want to know from you, what do you think should be FOIA'd next at the Columbus Housing Authority? This is everyone's money. No matter where you live in the United States, these are our federal tax dollars being mismanaged. By the way, does anyone know the HUD fraud, waste, and abuse hotline number? Until next time, this is the Tom Bigby Tales.